Cooking a perfect pork tenderloin can be a little bit challenging, but in this video I'm going to dispel some myths and I'm going to show you my tips and tricks so that you can cook a pork tenderloin perfectly every single time. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today we're going to make a delicious Cuban spiced pork tenderloin. However, you don't have to use the spices that I'm going to use. You can use whatever you like. The technique will be exactly the same. All right, the first thing we need to do is get the pork tenderloin trimmed up a little bit and get the Ninja Foodi Indoor Grill preheated. So I'm going to do both at the same time because it doesn't take very long to trim up the pork tenderloin. So I'm going to start the preheat in just a second. First though, I want to go over the seasonings that I'm going to be using in case you wanted to try out this rub. It's absolutely delicious. And I'm going to turn this into Cuban wraps. So I'm going to do some grilled wraps with it. And it's going to be, oh my gosh, so delicious. So what I'm using here for the rub is a half of a tablespoon of white sugar, a half of a teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of fine grind sea salt, a half of a tablespoon of smoked paprika, half of a teaspoon of black pepper, and a half of a teaspoon of cumin. That is enough for 1 pork tenderloin. Now you can double it, triple it, quadruple it. You can at least fit 2 or 3 pork tenderloins on the XL grill for sure. All right, so now we're gonna get the Ninja Foodi preheated, and I'm gonna preheat on max grill, but I'm not gonna cook the tenderloin on max grill. I'm gonna bump that heat down to medium because I don't want too much heat on the outside, which could char and kind of, it develops like a tough coating on the outside when you're cooking lean meat. So I like to start out at the hottest setting to preheat and then bump it down to medium for the cook. You could cook it on medium or high would probably work, but I prefer medium. All right, so we're gonna go to the grill setting and we wanna go on to max grill and we're gonna hit the start button. It's gonna take probably 5 to 10 minutes to heat that up and it should be plenty of time for me to trim this up and get it seasoned up. Now, when time permits, I do recommend trimming your pork tenderloin and seasoning it, wrapping it in some cling wrap and putting it in the refrigerator overnight. That really helps to just develop a great crust when you're gonna grill a pork tenderloin. But I don't have the time today, so we're just going to go ahead and trim it up. So you're gonna see some fat on the tenderloin, and I am not so worried about getting all of that off, but I do get some of it off, especially where the fat is connected to the membrane that's connected to this tissue here. This is like connective tissue, or what I call silver skin. That needs to come off. That's the most important part of trimming up a pork tenderloin, because if you leave it on, that area will be very tough. Pork tenderloins cook very quickly, so you're not gonna have enough time, if you're doing it on the grill like I'm doing, it cooks very quickly, like 12 minutes or so. And it's not gonna be enough time to break down that tissue like it would if you were pressure cooking it or something like that. So we are gonna cut it off here. So I find an area where I can see the meat and I can see that silver skin, and I just take a fillet knife and I go underneath of it, trying not to get hardly any of the meat itself. I don't wanna get much meat, just a tiny little bit, enough to get this silver skin off. And then when I can pull it up, I pull it up and just run my knife through it to get it the rest of the way off. So just go like that, like this. So I pull it up and put my knife there and just try to run it right underneath. There we go. Take it all the way down, get that off. So I've got a couple more pieces here that I'm gonna do, and then we'll be ready to rub it. All right, that looks really good. Okay, so that's tip number 1. Trim up your pork tenderloin. It's gonna make a world of difference when you go to slice it and eat it. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and mix up this rub here and get it all over the meat. And I guess tip 2 would be to rub the meat beforehand, 24 hours before you're gonna cook it, or at least 8 hours before you're gonna cook it. Wrap it and put it in the refrigerator. Really makes a difference if you have the time. All right. Now I know some people sprinkle on the rub, some people pat on the rub, I actually rub it into the meat. So I actually make sure that it is getting, you know, on that surface and totally covered. Even on the ends here, and even in any area that's kind of split, because some of the pork tenderloins, just from the way that they're butchered, they'll have some splits in them like that. Make sure that rub gets in there. It's going to make it extra delicious. And then roll it on your cutting board to make sure you get it all up. And there we go. All right, so our pork tenderloin is ready to cook, but our Ninja Foodi Grill is not quite ready, and that gives me enough time to go run and wash my hands, and then we will get to dispelling myth number 1. All right, we're very close to putting on the pork tenderloin, so let me talk about myth number 1. There is a myth that you have to cook pork to an internal temperature of 160. That is not correct. That used to be a long, long time ago that the USDA recommended that. They have changed their recommendations, and their current recommendations are to cook your pork tenderloin to an internal temp of 145 with a 3-minute rest period, okay? So I'm gonna go over a tip for doing that and getting your pork perfectly cooked as soon as we get this on, because now it says add food. So I'm gonna go ahead and lift it up. Now, I should say this is tip number 3. If you're cooking one pork tenderloin, or any meat that you're cooking, you're gonna cook one pork tenderloin, put it on diagonal. That way, this part of the grate stays super hot. When you go to flip, you'll have a better sear on the other side. And also press it down so that you are coming in contact with the grates of the grill. Now we're gonna use the thermometer for this, and I should have put this in before and I just forgot. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in while it's on the grill, but I do not recommend that. This is not a tip. This is a what not to do. Don't forget to put it in if you're gonna use it. So we're gonna put it into the side here about midway through. So I see this is the thicker part of the meat, so I wanna go right in the center here. Real quick, there's two, from what I understand, there's 2 places that this probe tests the temperature, at the tip and here. So we want to make sure it's inserted at least halfway. And it should be without any problem. All right, so we're going to go right about there, and I can kind of press down and feel like that's in a good spot there. All right, so now we're going to close the grill. We want to definitely take this down. Like I said, we're going to take it down to medium. We're going to go on the manual setting. Now, tip number 4, test your probe for accuracy. I just did that, and I found that it was not as accurate as I thought it was going to be. Mine runs between 4 and 5 degrees off. So I need to adjust my cooking time. My cooking temperature. I want to take this off when it is about 135, but because mine is off by 4 or 5 degrees, I need to set my target temp to 140. Okay? Because when I tested my thermometer, I'm going to repeat this because it can get a little confusing. When I tested my probe thermometer in the ice bath method, which I'm going to link to that article right up there because it's super informative and it's definitely going to help you cook more accurately in your grill. So when I did my test, my thermometer should have read in the ice bath 32 degrees, but it was reading 36 to 37 degrees, okay? So there's a discrepancy. It's reading hotter, meaning that it's gonna read the temperature of the meat 4 to 5 degrees hotter than it actually is, so I have to adjust my temperature settings to accommodate for that. But if your thermometer is accurate, you wanna set your target temp for 135 for a perfectly cooked pork tenderloin, okay? All right, so let me give you another tip that I found super interesting and I just learned recently. If you have a flat cut of meat, like a steak or even a chicken breast or a pork chop, you can expect to have somewhere between 5 to 10 degrees of carryover heat because of the amount of surface area that's exposed. However, if you have a cylindrical shaped meat, okay, like the pork tenderloin or the larger pork loin, you can expect 15 degrees of carryover heat during a 10-minute rest period. Now, I have tested this theory and it is accurate. So now I've adjusted my thinking when I make a pork tenderloin, and that's how I'm getting them to come out perfect every single time. Because overcooking lean meat is one of the worst things you can do. It becomes very tough, dry, and it just doesn't taste good. So do yourself a favor and cook your pork tenderloin just to about 145 or 150. Now, there's going to be a little bit of pink in there. So now I'm going to dispel another myth. The pink that you see in meat is not blood, okay? That's true of steak, chicken, or pork. Now, beef has the most what is called myoglobin. However, there are a good amount of myoglobin in pork, lesser amounts in chicken. So when you cook a chicken and your thermometer that you have tested and you know is accurate is reading 165 after the test period, and you cut into it and you see some red juices, that is not blood. It is not undercooked. It is called myoglobin, okay? And it can still be pinkish even after it's cooked. Same thing with pork. It is perfectly fine to eat pork that has a little bit of pink tinge to it as long as you have an accurate thermometer and you know that it hits that 145 degree temperature internally at the thickest part of the meat and you allow it to rest 30 minutes. All right, there we go. Now let's let this cook, and it's gonna take about 12 minutes. I'm gonna have Jeff put on his timer and I'll be able to estimate the time. But all of the test batches that I've done, which I've probably made 4 or 5 of these at least, these pork tenderloins, they've always taken just about 12 minutes. So that's what I'm expecting. So anytime now it's gonna tell me to flip, and then we're gonna flip it. Okay, tip number 5. When you go to flip any meat, especially lean meat, but any meat, this includes hamburgers, this includes chicken, this includes pork, anything, steak, if it is sticking to your grill, it is not ready to be released. Leave it alone, no matter what. Even if the Ninja Foodi is telling you to flip and you can't, it's just sticking a little bit, just let it go. It means it has not seared. When the meat is ready to be flipped, it will flip with ease, just like this just did. All right, so it jumped up from 138 to 140 like that. I didn't even see it, and it says get food. So the Ninja Foodi Indoor Grill with the probe, when it comes to the target temp, when the food gets to the target temp, it just shuts off. So we're gonna go ahead and remove it. Once you open the lid, you're gonna see this period of rest time. And I go a full 10 minutes. I think this counts up, I don't know, you know, it might count up to 10 minutes now, but one time I thought it only counted to 5 minutes, but I'm not sure about that. I don't pay attention to that because I'm gonna show you, this is tip number 6. And this is specific for the indoor grill. But instead of watching the time, I don't worry about that. Remember how I said we have to get this meat up to 145 with a 3-minute rest? What I do is hold this manual button down until we get the reading of the current temp. So we cook to 140, which remember, my thermometer's off, so that's actually about 135. And to show that, what I'm gonna do is put in my Pampered Chef thermometer. Now, these are not gonna be exact, okay, temperatures, even if you take in the 4 to 5 degree variable, and that's because there's no way for me to get exactly into the meat at the exact same spot. But that doesn't matter as long as both thermometers get up to where they need to get up to, we're in good shape. Don't remove your probe until after the rest time. If you remove your probe right now, guess what's gonna leak out? All those juices, and we're trying to keep them in the meat. That is why we do the rest period. We're trying to have the meat fibers reabsorb all those juices. If we were to cut this open right now, you would have a whole mess of juices pouring out. And I'm sure we've all done that. I've done that with steak before, you know, in a hurry and cut it open and all the juices come out. and that leaves the meat a little bit dry. So it's very important with lean cuts of meat that you let them rest at least 5 minutes, but I always go 10. We're at 147 and we've been resting about 2 minutes. But remember, that's not gonna be accurate, so I've gotta constantly do the math. I would take notes if you're doing that at home and you've tested your thermometer. So you see here I'm at 144, 147. We're seeing a discrepancy. This is about 4 or 5 degrees hotter than the actual temperature of the meat. So I'm going by this. All right, so it's been about 4 or 5 minutes of resting time and I'm up to my 150. So now I'm gonna go the remaining time, which is about 5 minutes. And I know it's gonna probably go up just maybe a degree, but at this point we have maxed out the carryover heat. So you might even see this drop, but it does not matter if that temperature starts to drop now because we did get up to the target temp. I hope all this makes sense, but I definitely go over this in detail in my written article that I linked to before, and I will also link to it below in the video description so that if you wanna look over it in the written form, you can. All right, so it's been about 10 minutes. We definitely hit all of our targets, so I am not concerned at all. I've got an internal reading, got up to 151, it's now 150. This is gonna be a perfectly medium rare pork loin. You can even let the rest period go a little bit shorter if you want. If you only want to get it up to that 145 with a 3-minute rest period, you can certainly do that. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and, well, we can turn the Ninja Foodi off. We don't need it. We can remove our probe thermometers. And that was reading at 150. I'm just doing this for my own interest. I'm gonna try to go down in the middle here and see what we got here. And we're hitting at about 149. So perfect. It's perfect for me. All right, now we're gonna cut it. Now, ordinarily, what I do is I usually serve the ends right away. It's just Jeff and I here, so this could be tip number 7. I serve the ends and leave the center for another day because it retains its juiciness and moisture, so it's easier to reheat than the ends. But I'm gonna cut it straight down the middle for you guys today so that you can see exactly what it's gonna look like. And I always cut it kind of on a diagonal. That's just my preference. And I'm just gonna slice right down here. There we go. You can see where the probe was. So I cut it immediately where the probe was. That's kind of interesting. All right, it looks beautiful. It's nice and juicy. It looks gorgeous, shiny, just slightly pink. But remember, that's okay. So I really hope that you will try to cook your pork to this temperature. It will make a world of difference if you have always been cooking it to 160. All right, let's taste it. I'm gonna go ahead and taste the end here. Which end do I want? I guess I'll taste this one because this looks like it's gonna be a little bit dry. So let's see. Got a nice crust on it, and oh my gosh, no, it is not dry at all. Look at that. Wow, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. No, I should have sliced that, huh? All right, let me take a bite. Mmm. Wow. It is so good. Tender. Now the inside, the middle is gonna be more tender. But it is so delicious. This rub, it is simply amazing. This rub is simply amazing, and I hope you give it a try. But if not, use salt and pepper, use some rosemary and garlic, use whatever seasonings you want to use to grill up your pork tenderloin perfectly for you and your family. As always, make it yours, make it delicious, and keep it real.